Different geographies bring unique insights and experiences that will help us bring this subject to life in a meaningful way. HyeConnect is all about creating spaces where important conversations happen, connecting our global Armenian community through dialogue, learning, and shared stories. We believe that by bringing subjects like today's to life, we help strengthen understanding, collaboration, and inspiration across our network. If you haven't already, we invite you all to join the HyeConnect community. You can register online or download the applications to stay mobile apps to stay updated on future event discussions and networking opportunities. We'll dedicate the last 30 minutes of our 2-hour session to audience questions. Okay, let me introduce our speakers. We have exceptional speakers, each representing a key pillar of diaspora engagement culture, policy, academia, economy, innovation, and network building. Dr. Aleksandr Gevorkyan, professor and Henry George Chair in Economics at St. John's University. His research focuses on open economy, macroeconomic development, and diaspora economics. He is the author of Transition Economies and the lead editor of the Oxford Handbook of Post-Socialist Economies. Dr. Razmik Panossian, director of the Armenian Communities Department at the Galust Gulbenkian Foundation, author of the Armenians, From Kings and Priests to Merchants and Commissars. His research explores nationalism, identity, and Armenia-diaspora relations. Dr. Hratch Tchilingirian, sociologist, author, and innovation executive director of institutional innovation at the Western Diocese of the Armenian Church and associate professor at INALCO University in Paris. His work centers on identity, diaspora studies, and Armenian communities worldwide. Dr. Yervant Zorian, co-founder of HyeConnect and vice president of AGBU, president of Synopsis Armenia and IEEE fellow with over 40 patents and numerous international awards, including Armenia's National Medal of Science, a global leader in Armenian innovation and digital connectivity. Okay, maybe we can start with any one of you. The main subject, what we are going to talk is why diaspora matters, and actually why it is matter for you. What is why you started this diaspora, decided to get engaged in your studies on diaspora, and what are your recent research about that. If you can shortly tell us where are you now with the research. What you have already published, we know about that, but what you are currently working on would be great to hear by each of you. Let's start from Aleksandr.
Oh, I was hoping I'd go last. Well, hello everyone. Thank you.
It's just alphabetical.
Thank you, Liliya, for the very generous introduction.
My pleasure.
I'm happy to be part of this meeting, especially with the co-panelists whose work I closely follow, admire, respect, and promote as much as I can in our social media world. And so getting to the question in terms of, you asked actually 3 questions, I think, Liliya, in one question. So first, how we get to this, I think the path towards diaspora for everyone is very personal. It starts with individuals' upbringing and who they are, the traditions in the family, and the networks that family, social networks that family interacts. So there's also a cultural element. So there are a lot of subjective determinants here, I would argue. And I think that's important to keep in mind, and maybe we can develop on that a little bit further. Another point, which is probably a bit more general, and why is it relevant today? There's something to be said as an economist. I think there's something to be said about our very materialistic world, and this idea of a diaspora gives this intangible sort of power, right, and energy to an individual, that there is something beyond just a daily routine. There is something bigger, and that's the connection with that the culture, the history, whichever that place is. And on the other hand, most of today's published work that has popularized the concept of diaspora beyond its sort of original sort of nest of sociology, anthropology, history, now spilling over into business, is very sort of transactional, right? So we can talk about that as well. And in terms of what I'm working on right now, last year I concluded my own second diaspora survey, and I'm working on summarizing those results in more of a coherent and consistent way. I've written short updates on that here and there. And in the context of, I guess, more of a applied and then economic relevance, I'm looking at the topic of diaspora investment. I guess that's the way to call it, but specific instrument within that, the diaspora bond. So, and I state my position immediately, that's not something that should be done. But I explain in a very lengthy article why not. So these are the main things, but the bigger interest is really the sort of this connection, if one exists, between diaspora and economic development of what we may call the home country. So thank you.
Hratch, please.
Thank you, Liliya, for this opportunity to discuss together this very important topic. Obviously, why diaspora matters? Because, first of all, more Armenians live outside the Republic of Armenia than in Armenia. So that's just a simple fact that there are Armenians in over 100 countries. Of course, when we talk about the diaspora, we are by definition almost talking about connections, about networks, because ultimately the diaspora is the issue of identity. Armenian identity is the core of diasporic life, because it is the connection with something Armenian or with Armenianness and so on. So in general terms, I think it is important subject for research, but also it's part of our reality that we live in so many countries. But I'd like to just give a couple of results from our research, the Armenian Diaspora Survey, which we conducted in the last few years, about the idea of networking, which is the sort of the sub-subject or subtitle of our subject today. And as you know, we did this survey in 10 countries and more than 50 communities, and we asked 13,000 Armenians. And based on our research, 4 in 10 diasporans in all 10 countries indicated that professional networks were needed in their local community. Because we asked, one of the questions was, which activities are needed in your local community? And 4 in 10 said that professional networking was an important needed activity. In the US and Canada, the percentage was even more than half were saying that professional networks were important. And when we come to the age groups, the 25 to the 34-year age group, in the US, that's more than 6 in 10, and in Canada, more than half who were prioritizing networking. The second point that our results show is when we ask about social media use, why the purpose or the why do they use social media? And there also we see that connecting with other Armenians in the US, the young people, 18 to 24 years old, 7 in 10 are saying they use it to connect with other Armenians. In Canada, more than half. In the US also, the next age group, 25 to 34 years old group, more than 6 in 10. And in Canada, more than half were saying that they're using social media to connect with other Armenians. So we see that the idea of connection, the idea of networking is a sort of an inbuilt aspect of diasporic life today in the 21st century.
Any information about what we can expect in the near future from your studies, from what you are recently working on?
Obviously, the Gevorkyan Foundation is going to make the research results and all the research material available to scholars.
Mm-hmm.
We have collected enormous amount of information, data. We've done more than 400 interviews in addition to the quantitative study. So all this will be in due course available for deeper analysis, because there's a lot of work to be done to analyze this information. In my personal experience or my personal project, I'm engaged in the Western Diocese in California in trying to do social science, kind of applied social science, to see how the research and the results that we gained, how can we use some of the knowledge we gained to have an impact on the community? How can we help our communities with what we learn? So in a way to take the research and turn it into programs and into policy development, so that we're not only just doing the research because they're interested in it of themselves, but we can also create impact with the research that is being done, and I'm sure will be done in the coming years.
If maybe I can jump in here, Liliya, if it's okay.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Of course, you are welcome.
The survey that Hratch led and implemented is the Armenian Diaspora Survey, and as he said, it interviewed 13,000 people in 10 countries and 50 some odd communities, Hratch, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, more than 50, yeah.
Yeah. So this research is now with us. The raw data is with us, and we are now working on making this raw data available in a way that's usable by the public and by experts. So it's going to go on the website in a manner that is user-friendly. And so that is something that's going to happen in the first half of 2026. It's an enormous amount of work because of European privacy laws. We have to make sure that everything is anonymized, et cetera, et cetera. So all this is happening. The idea of this, eventually, we only scratched the surface. Hratch already published 4 little booklets, which is on the website, but we only scratched the surface. The idea is to really do profound analysis of diasporan attitudes, diasporan perspectives on various national issues, and publish books and several articles. And the idea of this came back in 2017-18, and for the 100th time, someone says, well, the diaspora thinks this, the diaspora wants this. And I thought, well, how do we know what the diaspora wants? No one ever surveys or asks the opinions of the diaspora. And we did that. So we have a pretty good idea now of at least between 2019 and 2023, what the diaspora thought about some of the major fundamental issues that is facing the Armenian world. And this is what we're going to make available in the in 2026, which fits into part of another research project that think tank that we're launching in December called Diaspora and Perspectives. So it's part of this bigger research project. But this in itself was a huge thing for the Gulbenkian Foundation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, please, if you continue. Razmik, do you have something else to say?
Well, I don't know if you wanted me to answer the questions that you asked. The only thing I would add to what I think Hratch and Aleksandr said is, the concept of being a diasporan, a spiritual, I even know the saying spiritual. It's a term that Vahe used or coined, one of the great intellectuals of the diaspora. And it's not just an extension of a homeland. It's not just an extension of a place. It is an identity in itself. It's like being a diasporan Armenian. And it is an identity that was constructed in the diaspora 1920s onwards after the genocide. And it's very much who we are as the established diaspora. We are diasporans. We think as diasporans. We relate to the homeland as diaspora. And so it's a very profound identity. It's not just, we live abroad. It's something much deeper than that. It has its own culture. Obviously, Western Armenian is part of it as its language. It has its own perspectives. And when someone says, "Who are you?" I say, "I'm a spiritual. I was born in Lebanon, grew up in Canada, studied in the UK. Now I live in Portugal." Okay, so it's very much a diasporan in that sense. And then there are other points that we can come back to. I don't want to talk too long. Especially,
I think that's one of the essential points. So again, I'm following two literatures. That's sort of traditional diaspora-focused literature and this new emerging discussions on investment, entrepreneurship, and things like this. And I think there's a massive misunderstanding on that other side, the business side, because any migration is immediately considered to be a diaspora. And essentially, that's what drew me into this whole field in more academic terms, rather than sort of superficial. Or I feel it. That's why I know it. But more in terms of research, and the more I read and more I sort of discover, sort of more fundamental work behind the concept of diaspora, the more I become convinced that we need more sort of education into this business literature, saying that what Razmik just said, that diaspora is sort of a state of mind. It's not just a state of existence living abroad, but it's a state of mind which dictates how you think and sort of just interact with society in general. And I think that's very important.
What you're saying, Aleksandr, is absolutely right. If Liliya, you asked the question, why diasporas matter, right? They matter at the material level that Aleksandr certainly highlighted, and Hratch said 2/3 of the population of Armenians, 2/3, maybe more, live outside of Armenia. Diaspora is a source of ideas, it's a source of money, it's a source of innovation, it's a network. These are all material things. And economists can look at that, and it's important, as Aleksandr said. But from the diaspora's perspective, established diaspora's perspectives, and we have many diasporas, so we'll get into that, I'm sure, later. All that is fine, but it's also who I am as a person. It's something much, much deeper. It's not just material, it's not just sociological, it's something much, much deeper that goes to the core of who post-genocide diasporans are. And this is very different with the new diaspora, where the identity is different. The identity emanates from the source is Yerevan of Armenia, not Yerevan, Armenia. But the other diaspora, the source is the diaspora itself. It used to be the Ottoman Empire. I mean, that's a lost lands, idealized and all that. But it's now the source is the diaspora itself, and it's difficult to find common ground between these two because they tend to dismiss each other, and I don't think that they shouldn't. That's what Aleksandr, I think, is onto something in terms of bringing these two as much as possible together.
Okay. One thing I want to note, I see a raised hand. I would like to remind the questions and answers will be for the last 30 minutes. Or you can just write your question and it will be first one to be answered. Thank you for the information you provided. It's very important because once I started my diving into these theories of digital nation, I found that already several decades it is being considered since the internet started, because Chinese, Indian, Singapore, Korean, they have fantastic results in digital nation aspects, because they are bringing the energy into the countries, which is very important. How can we learn from them, and how what we have to give to the world as a Armenian diaspora, what is the specifics we have, and there is numbers that only from 110 countries, only 25 have diaspora infrastructures on ministry level or in some governmental level. That means we are very happy to have our diaspora affairs on governmental level, but the strategies which will be built, it can be based only on the service which you are conducting. So it can't be made just based on the what we see around. So the numbers you are providing, the research you are doing, it's tremendous results you are bringing. It's very, very important. Several questions. Though there is the world is changing very fast, and the main component, the trust, is which can bring together our nation, and the optimism is which we need to survive as a nation, is becoming less and less. But I would like to talk with you this how can the distance and diversity and generational change, which are challenges for Armenian nation, global nation, how can Armenians across continents build genuine trust and collaboration in today's digital world? How can the trust be cultivated across generations, continents, and different political or religious views within the Armenian diaspora? Actually, because I am now representing HyeConnect, I can't, and I think nobody can now ignore the role of the digital world and social networks in creating those ties now, because people are in any way they are in social networks. So it's very important to think very well how to bring the energy which is spread not only physically all over the world, but also the time people are spending on social media, the energy which is they are spending. How can this be mobilized and be used more effectively, so it could be mutually useful for both, for diaspora and for Armenia? So the final question is what role can digital platforms and organizations like HyeConnect play in turning dispersed communities into connected, collaborative networks? So if you have any insights on this, what do you think, which percentage of the people are ready to invest, ready to engage in national aspects there? Who want to answer first? This is you to decide. Whoever has the answer.
On social media, we should defer to Razmik.
Yeah. There is a pun there. I'm not on social media. Okay.
If I may, Razmik, go ahead.
No, Raj, go.
Yeah, in my experience, again, working within the communities, it's very important that we start by listening to the young people. A lot of times we don't listen to what their thinking is. So we need to listen in terms of what their expectations are, where they are in their lives, for instance, when we say national or nation, these are not commonly understood by every Armenian diaspora. When you say hayrenik or homeland, in our survey, more than half say that it's the country where they are born. But we assume that for every Armenian, 10 million Armenians around the world, if you say hayrenik, everybody means or understands the Republic of Armenia. But there are varieties and ranges of responses. This is just one example. So young people, if we're talking about 18 to the 24 years old, obviously they live in a different world than previous generations. To listen, because if you listen to the young people, you have to change yourself. We cannot do things the way we want to do it in the name of doing this for the next generation without their input in terms of what is it that we are trying to put in. And I should say one aspect which is a lot of times forgotten: the new generation of Armenians, they have connections with Armenia, with things Armenian, without being mediated by Armenian organizations. In the past, it was the political parties, it was the charitable organizations, the AGVUs of this world, and so on. But now they have direct relationship with their peers in Armenia. They go and visit in the summers. Kids and young people in different countries in Lebanon are connected with people in Toronto or Los Angeles. So this is a new reality for the established diaspora, as it were, in terms of the thinking that goes. So we have to also listen, and we have to also realize that we have to change the way we work within our communities, within the networks.
Okay, I see.
Razmik?
No, what Hratch was saying with the young people, it's a very simple but radical idea. Listen to them and let them, give them the means, let them create their own identity and their own culture. And don't dictate to them, this is, hayır lalo asbest diyorlar. This is the way to be Armenian. You must bear the weight of 3,000 years of history on your shoulders. No, just give them an opportunity to say, to create themselves and treat that creation as a legitimate part of today's Armenian culture. And we don't do that in the diaspora. In Armenia, there is much more vibrant youth-based culture. In the diaspora, there isn't. Young people who want to do something that's a bit different, a bit radical, a bit outside of community structures, don't have the space. They just leave the community. And there should be programs like this. And I don't want to keep coming back to Gevorkyan, but in Lebanon there is a program like this just started called Inspark, just giving the young people a voice. Let them create what they want to create, and I think that's the key. Otherwise, they'll go on with other things in their lives. We tend to forget that for them to be Armenian in the diaspora is an option. It's not. It's not a given. They can choose not to be Armenian in the diaspora. And that's the reality of diaspora.
And it's an expensive option, in many different ways, material and emotional. But if I could maybe summarize and add to the previous points, I absolutely agree with the emphasis on the adaptation of our diaspora organizations and the entire the system of those groups. Oftentimes it seems they just sort of exist for the purpose of existence rather than some sort of transformation, and putting up events here and there, that's fun, but how does this build into some sort of a systemic approach? And that's something that needs to be discovered, and this is where the emphasis on young people has to come in, because the younger generation, you mentioned generational changes in your question, Liliya, so younger generation will have either interest or absolute disinterest in getting together. So it's not just letting the younger generation decide what they want to do, but maybe there needs also to be some guidance. But this guidance, as Razmik mentioned, should not be dogmatic. It should be more of a partnership, if that's a good term, working with them. And then social media is really just a reflection of much deeper and more, again, profound tendencies and features of a diaspora entity. So what spills out into social media as a sort of momentous or emotional response may not necessarily turn into something tangible. It's yes or no. There's no guarantee there. But if I could also add something, in my research, so I did my first survey. The individual survey was back took a long time, 2015 to early 18 or so. And on the basis of that, the responses I was getting from that survey, it became obvious that there's interest to engage, but not much trust, to your question about trust. And that's when I actually wrote about the digital platform, talking about digital platforms, suggesting that can be a way to sort of verify each other on two sides, and whether or not somebody is proposing a project and if that's legitimate or not, and this could work. So I'm glad there's certain implementations of this idea in different forms. But there's something else. We can also be, we have to be sort of open. And this is a difficult question, and for sort of seasoned diaspora scholars, it's a massive research question, but open to those who choose to be Armenians. As Razmik mentioned, it's an option. And if we strictly speak in ethnic terms, then all of our surveys ask sort of your background in many different ways of asking that. Let's say parents, right? Parents are Armenian, so then consider yourself Armenian. But then every once in a while, there's somebody who says, and I know someone who is all of a sudden interested in Armenian culture, but grew up as pure British English. But turns out great-grandmother was the Armenian descendant of the new Julfa merchants in India. Right? And so all of a sudden there's this person who may be also participating in this whole diaspora engagement, whatever we want to call it. Our organizations have to be able to adapt and offer some type of, I call it engagement infrastructure, to connect with sort of this diversity of Armenianness that's out there. And one of the reasons, and in addition to the example I mentioned, one of the other reason, again, I'm just repeating what Razmik and Hratch already mentioned, is that because not everyone is born in the Republic of Armenia, right? Majority were born outside. But the modern focus on, and there's a popular chart, diaspora estimates by country, and it shows Armenia is 26%. It's a chart that I always bring up and say, this is how you not count the diaspora, because it completely misses the fact that, I mean, the chart is based on the people born in Armenia living abroad, right? So the United Nations keeps track of these things, and they have 26% or 7 as an estimate. And that's not the correct chart. We just talked about how 2/3, right, is outside of Armenia. So I think that's very important to keep in mind. And I guess we can get deeper and deeper. There are even bigger questions within the diaspora groups because of the disunity and the generational differences as well. There's a chunk of the large share of diaspora that is an outcome of the genocide. And then there's the new wave of the diaspora. And then there are those who are just discovering that actually they are part of the diaspora. The typical Russian Armenian does not consider themselves being part of the diaspora. The diaspora is the Western diaspora. And this is very important because it determines the attitudes and, again, thinking and such. And to conclude, just one thing. I worked with one of countries, let's not name names, although it might come up, but basically Eastern European economy that recently, as they said in their own words, they recently discovered the concept of diaspora because of very high rate of migration, people moving, labor migration, moving out. And they're developing ways of connecting with those people, and we can talk in details more about this. But one thing that's stuck in my mind that they said was that we are aware of experience of Armenian diaspora, and we're learning from it. So don't underestimate what's already out there.
Now, if I can, I think we lost Yervant again. He was there, and then we lost. So let me just unpack some of these ideas. Yes, but to add a footnote to what Aleksandr was saying, how many of us have spoken to Armenians from Armenia, Hayastansis, who have been abroad outside of Armenia for 30 years, even longer, and we ask them, are you a Spilkahai? Are you a diasporan? And they say, no, we're not. So it's a very conscious thing. No, I'm here for 30 years. I'm never going to go back. I'm going to stay here, but I'm not diaspora. And whereas the established diaspora, the post-genocide diaspora, is very much says, I'm a diaspora. But let's unpack some of these ideas. We're talking about connection. We're talking about networks. We're talking about trust. We're conflating all these things. Connection is not commitment. Commitment is something else. And commitment and trust, I would put them together. You trust people for all sorts of various reasons, not because you're connected to them, but for cultural reasons, historical reasons, family reasons. And let's not forget that this network idea in Armenians is nothing new. The biggest network and the most successful network we have had is 300 years ago with the New Julfa Armenians, right? They had a tremendous network from Philippines to Amsterdam, controlled by the Habur New Julfa. So, but this sort of connection, it's not commitment. Social media in its essence is connection without commitment. And the network is a network, we're connected, but it doesn't mean that we've committed. The commitment comes from personal engagement, from, as I said, culture, and the trust is built on that. Anecdotally, when diasporan Armenians sometimes naively, when they see another Armenian, they automatically trust them, and then they're proven to be wrong, for example. But it's how to build that, and that question is a different set of questions than the network question and the connection question. It is a huge assumption to make that connection leads to connection, and it would not lead to connection unless something else is done. And I don't know what that something else is, but that something else is much deeper than the connection. It's much more based on who you are, who you relate to, what language, not the physical language, but what language you speak. It's all these things that come together. I mean, it's history. You trust family members, you trust your king, whatever. So let's not confuse all these things together, because otherwise we're putting the cart before the horse.
No. And I think that's another very important distinction and reminder, because they say friendship comes with trust, and trust comes with time. So there has to be a successive number of sort of experiences that lead towards this trust building. And that's where the micro networks, like around a church, around an organization, we can see that, right? We know that there are people who go to one church that would never go to another church. And that is sort of that manifestation of trust and distrust. And then so we have that. Having that, then we need to also think about how that connects with Armenia, if that is what we're focusing on. There's really, by the way, interesting conversation in the discussion board, and I know we'll get to those questions, but I can't help myself. And there's one question in terms of transformation, and I think this is where there has to be an understanding of a common goal. What is this organization, what its purpose, right? What is its purpose of existence? What is the uniform goal for so-called Armenian diaspora? So-called because we're so diverse. In the minds of a lot of people that are non-Armenian, and I gave you one example, there's I think Razmik or Hratch mentioned, there's an almost automatic connection. Armenian diaspora connects with the Republic of Armenia. I think that's called a country-centric view, right? So that's probably fine. Maybe that is what's needed. I'm not stating one or the other, but I think that's a conversation also to have.
But if I may add, this idea of connection and networking, it doesn't have to be this total connection, like for like. You could be connected with someone for a particular reason or particular project or particular function, but disagree with that person on a lot of other things. So I don't think, at least in the 21st century, this networking is not total in the sense that it's a vehicle, it's a means of getting from one thing to another, or enhancing a movement from one thing to another, whether it's career-wise, whether it's emotional, whether it's social, and so on. So I think this is something also, I believe it's important for us as diasporans and Armenians in general, that we don't have to necessarily agree on everything in order for us to work together. That we can agree on 10 things, but work on one thing that we agree. So let's do that. So this is also something I always say, the most difficult aspect of my work is to change this mentality, how you see things, to unlearn and redo it again in a new way. So I think we need to make this switch before we change the architecture. Are we willing, to convince ourselves that we need to change? It's not going to be the same way that we've been doing it for 50 years. So there are other ways as to use the cliche, to agree to disagree, but to do something with it, not just say, okay, we agree to disagree, but then we go home. No, we disagree, but what is it that we agree on? Let's work on that.
Yes, totally agree. Totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Yervant, can you speak now?
Let me see if you hear me. Do you hear me?
Yes, Yervant.
Okay, yes.
So,
my apologies for the complications. Also, my apologies for missing parts of it since I had to reboot my system. So I will not be able to give all the necessary input since I was not following all the points. But if you have certain questions to me, I'll be happy to answer.
I left the greeting on behalf of board of trustees to you. Usually I do it on behalf of team and on behalf of board, every participant. So, Yervant, we touched we were answering the question why diaspora is matters, and what the recent activities of our participants are. Speakers are on that on their research or activities. So we expect some updates from you
of course,
regarding this.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll be happy to. So first of all, why diaspora matters? As we know, 3/4 of our nation is in diaspora, so it matters a lot.
Yeah.
Unlike many other nations where they are heavy on the mainland, we are not. So we are distributed. We have been distributed in the past, as we all know, but we have been distributed, and I heard Razmik saying from Philippines to Amsterdam to Iceland. Absolutely true. So we have been distributed. We have been connected through those distributions, but that was a small subset of our nation. What we have currently, and it's even being augmented day after day, we have a large percentage in diaspora. That's why it matters. That's why we have to connect the diaspora to each other properly, to the mainland as well. I myself don't see diaspora and the mainland in terms of connection, in terms of collaboration, in terms of networking with each other to be very different. I see individuals, I see communities. And those communities can be local communities or can be distributed communities, can be professional communities, can be hobby communities, can be churches. So that connectedness is very important. Now, I also heard the comment from Razmik, and that was a very good point, that being connected and not only connected, but having trusted connectedness are two different things. Absolutely. However, it starts by being connected. First, you make a connection, and then you build the trust on top of it, right? So without having the connection, you cannot create trusted connections. That's why I think we need both. We need to establish mechanisms, ways, infrastructure to be connected first, and then on top of it, build the necessary. We are on this HyeConnect forum now. For me, being one of the co-founders of HyeConnect, I see the digital way of being connected to be important. So having an infrastructure, HyeConnect doesn't build trusted connectedness. No, it doesn't build content for that connectedness. No, it only provides the infrastructure to be connected. It provides the means, okay, for individuals from different interest groups to find each other and to be connected and to create collaborations and to do good things for Armenia, good things for Armenians, good things for them as well, non-commercially. So if we think of that, we see that perhaps, coming to my point, that giving a mechanism to connect with each other is a necessary component, I think. That's why we are doing this. And I'll come back to a point that I often make, that Armenians are a neural network. Neural network means we have neurons and we have connections between the neurons. Okay? Being a neuron, an isolated neuron is not good. We know some have isolated neurons, some have neurons that have only few connections, and some have neurons that are well connected to the rest. Now, we need two things. We need to have strong neurons, which means we need to provide the necessary strength for each neuron to understand the identity, to evolve the identity, to exceed over time. So that neuron itself needs to be strong. That's why we do lots of things in education, in culture, in other aspects, in diaspora, also in Armenia, to have strong neurons. But the next thing comes, isolated neuron need to be well connected as well, with trusted connectedness. So there we have to provide the means for those connections to be properly built and nurtured over time. That's how I see myself. I'll stop.
Okay, thank you. And as we talked about HyeConnect, and to also justify why we are today here, there is a statement that digital nation is not built through technology alone, but through trust, relevance, and reciprocity. So I love one example, and I bring it all the time. When first time in 19th century telegraph was invented, and they said to Ralph Emerson that, now from one corner of America you can send the message to another corner of America. He said, but do people have something to say each other? I love that, but because we are creating, we are organizing these discussions only because we want to have to see what do Armenian people want to talk each other, if they have something to talk each other, to do together. I am very sure that the immune system of Armenians is very strong, and it was proved many times during the war when everybody is mobilizing without no matter who they are, where they are, what religion, what party, and whatever. But that is the problem, that we would never like to organize our nation in that way, with paying such a price for mobilizing the nation. And here one participant quoted Razmik's book. He said, one of the most interesting things about Razmik's book was how before the genocide, not every Armenian spoke Armenian. So maybe these challenges we with Armenians are valuable. We can gain lessons to be organized before something happens, not once it is happening. So
okay.
Yes.
Sorry, finish your thought.
Yeah, that is what I am telling. I just going through the comments which we have, and I guess during the session, many questions will be answered by our conversation. That's my point.
Okay.
So Yervant, because AGBU is working very consistently on turning this sentiment to strategy, like the many diaspora initiatives begin with emotion, pride, memory, identity, but to turn that into strategy and impact, measurable impact for both Armenian and global communities. Certain steps are completed by HGBU, and the young generation improvement, young professionals all over the world. So I would like to ask you to talk a little bit. I hope, Aleksandr, you will not forget what you was going to comment, okay? But as Yervant is with us, Yervant, just bring some...
Yeah, I can give some examples. It's true. I mean, HBU is our largest diaspora and NGO, and it is distributed in many, many countries. As we know, historically, it has presence in the old diaspora, now also in the new diaspora, also in the homeland. So what it does, it tries to connect people in each community first. So that's why it has chapters in the communities, but also it connects those chapters to each other to create a network of chapters and connect them to Armenia as well. Since Armenia's independence, we do a lot more to connect programs in the communities into Armenia as well. You mentioned young professionals, and that is for different age groups, for children, for students, for professionals post-student age. So one example you mentioned was this young professionals. Young professionals are people who are 25 to 40 years old in certain professions in each community. So what HBU does, it groups them together, it encourages them to collaborate, it encourages them to know each other first and to create programs to strengthen their community and adopt programs in Armenia. And with that, go to Armenia, visit, make sure that those programs are successful and so on. So there's the Armenia connection there. So we have young professionals in now 44 cities around the world. The last ones I met, for instance, I was in Korea when I met the group in Seoul, in same thing in Estonia, something else. So there are groups everywhere, but what's important is they network with each other. They have annual meetings where they, from all the countries, they come to one point. Last one was in Armenia. Hundreds of them, 600-700 of them were there participating in a week-long activities. So it's just to say that networking is local. I think there's a local element of it, and there's a global element of it. And the global element is not diaspora only by itself, networking with its own neurons, but also connecting with Armenia as well through the same aspects. If you're a young professional, then young professional. If you're a scout, then you need to have your network of scouts. If you are a adult at a certain age for a certain group, you network there as well. And at some point, I can bring the example of my own profession. I'm in the technology sector, and how the networking in our technology sector, again, among diasporans and diaspora Armenia, created a nice collaborative and beneficial outcome. And in this case, brought prosperity to Armenia, prosperity to the individuals, prosperity to the companies. So because we always work on two things, right? Maintaining our identity and enhancing the prosperity of Armenia, prosperity of individuals. And for me, these are the two ultimate goals that we work towards. So everything we do, you can collapse them into either identity and enhancement of identity or prosperity at large. So all our organizations from day one, they worked for both or one of the two. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Aleksandr, go ahead with your comment.
Okay, I was wondering if we can continue the conversation, I guess, that sort of brings all the panelists together, this whole, I mean, let's call it the connection versus trust, right? Because there's quite a bit of research into this, and what we as, I guess, representatives of the Armenian diaspora, we should be aware of that there are other diasporas out there in the world. And again, as I mentioned, they're learning from the Armenian experience of what not to do. And that's important.
Or to do as well.
For example, one of the most incredibly clearly stated and all-accepting diaspora strategy policies is that of Scotland's, of all the places. Why? Because there's only one guidance that they provide, and that is, if you want Scotland to prosper, we're here for you. Nothing else, right? So that's the unifying form. The same is in Ireland. Ireland is strictly focused on helping the rest of the world, but if you want to help Ireland, we're here for you. There's the concept of adopted identity, which Razmik and Hratch are sort of more seasoned specialists in to talk about. But these countries, two examples, they offer that, right? And it is something to probably to understand and learn from. For example, in my surveys, the first one and the second one that I'm finishing now, there's one consistent response, and that is, I'd like to connect, but I'm not sure I would be accepted, or I don't speak the language, or I don't know how to connect. So in that sense, the digital platforms do help bring people together. But there's a lot of hesitance, and it comes back to this trust problem, because sure, we can connect, but somebody told me they had a bad experience in Armenia and this and that, and so I'm going to wait for something to change. We don't have to be specific, right? So whatever, and then that'll be the time when I will reconsider maybe doing something. Another issue that I think we should raise is that not everyone in the diaspora is an entrepreneur, and that's one of the themes that keeps the loudest drum that gets beaten. There are a lot of people in the cultural sort of field and arts, academia, and so on, who don't have this entrepreneurial feel for things, right? But they know massive things, and they can just share that experience. So what is expected in this case from the country is that, well, first from the organization, diaspora, that nurture those type of individuals, that work with them, and then the connection from the country is that the acceptance, right? So there are professional groups, as Yervant mentioned, that are organized across the world, but they hold their annual meetings in Armenia. So that's great. That's one example. But what tends to happen is that we have a lot of these experiences, and I wrote about that in the study of Armenian diaspora I did for the International Organization for Migration of Armenia. That came out 2 years ago or so. And what was coming through those interviews was that the first question that I always asked was, has diaspora potential been fully tapped? And the answer was always no. But then the question follow up, why, and what's holding this up? And that was this answer, that there's a lot of segmented, fragmented work, and it all seems great, but somehow it only benefits that exclusive network or group that is engaged in this, with I guess, for lack of a better word, with minimal output towards the common good. And in my opinion, the Scotland's diaspora statement, or at least, I don't know how long it will last, but for now, at least, they're very active, is indicative of that, right? There has to, I think, there has to be connection back in, to Armenia, and not to substitute that the diasporic identities, which are many, but to maintain them, actually. So it's mutually needed connection. I can
If I
go
may
on
quickly
more.
add, Aleksandr, I think one point of caution when we're comparing with other diasporas, the Armenian diaspora has a much longer biography than the Republic of Armenia. We've had diaspora for over 1,000 years, and the Republic of Armenia is 35 years old. So as opposed to the Irish and the other diasporas that we talk about, I think obviously there are comparative elements, but it's not exactly like for like.
No, absolutely.
In all aspects. So
yeah.
The case of the Armenian diaspora, like the Jews, are close. We are close to in terms of this long history or centuries of diasporic life. So the Armenian diaspora was there long before even the First Republic of Armenia. That's why, as Razmik referred to, the spirkti, the idea of being spirkti, a citizen in inverted commas of a spirk, is a much more ingrained and older identity than in the post-Republican Armenian state's definition of what Armenianness is and what Armenian diaspora is. For from at least the Soviet times, is if you look in the dictionary definition of diaspora, it says Armenians who live outside the Soviet Armenian Republic. If you go to the 1970s dictionaries in Armenia, it's defined as Armenians living outside the Soviet Armenia. And obviously, since 91, it's Armenians living outside Ardiergir. We're not even using a spirit, we're saying Ardiergir, those who are not living outside the country. So I think what I'm mentioning is because we are using terminologies many a times, especially in Armenia diaspora relations, assuming that we have the same understanding of what these terms mean, but we don't. Mm-hmm. And one last point that I'd like to make, which is relevant to our discussion in general, especially when it comes to networking and connections. Again, we take being Armenian as the fundamental point of connection, which is good as a starting point. But at least in my view and in my experience and research, there are many points where we don't agree on policy and politics. In Armenian, we only use one word, քաղաքականություն, which means politics and policy. Obviously, they're two different things, but in Armenian, քաղաքականություն, it's like this global term which doesn't distinguish between policy and politics. And many a times when we are talking within the diaspora, whether it's vis-a-vis the Republic of Armenia on any aspect, economics, politics, social, cultural, we have political differences, but we're talking as if by the sheer fact that we are Armenians, therefore we agree on all these issues. You know, some people are conservative, some people are liberal, some people are socialist, some people are somewhere in between, as our research shows, that we have a variety of political views in the diaspora at least, which as if, I mean, it's not stated, but it's the subtext of many of these conflict of disagreements we have when it comes to Armenia or from Armenia to the diaspora. But we're not articulating as, oh, a policy difference, a political difference, as we see now in the diaspora, where you have political groups who are, you could say that it's working against Armenia, and there are groups who are working for Armenia, and yet they're members in the same community, and we think we're part of we are the Armenian community. But in the same thing, you have political and policy differences. And I think this is something that we need to take on board when we are analyzing these issues. And by the way, Liliya, I believe this issue of trust has a connection with what I just said on the larger, because trust could be broken any moment. You know, you can trust me now, but tomorrow I can do something that you completely lose the trust that you had yesterday.
Yeah, can I add to Hratch that it's not just the political differences. They're more even as deep, or maybe deeper than the political differences, are the social differences, right? I mean, the people, not only in terms of social status or class or whatever, but social differences in terms of people's culture, people's identity that is not ethnic based, or their identity, sexual identity or whatever. And there are profound differences here. as well. I want to bring in a different point. I don't know, Aleksandr, you wanted to say something on this point, because I want to bring a different point into the conversation.
I think well, the simple point, which is going to require 10 hours of conversation, is to try to define what it means to be an Armenian. But let's just throw it out there to think and maybe reference it here and there. But to your, Razmik, to what you were saying, right? And first, I agree with Hratch that I'm not making a one-to-one comparison, but I am saying that in today's transactional world, we need to understand what others are doing. And Raja Brubaker, right, that's the right name, sociologist, stated there are three classical diasporas: the Greeks, the Jews, and the Armenians. I mean, this is something, and goes to show the thousands of years of that existence. So that's why the question is, well, what does it mean to be an Armenian? But to Razmik's more sort of specific statement on the social and socioeconomic differences within the diaspora, what struck me, or it strikes me, continues to strike me, are simple things, and which are the daily interactions, routine interactions within our communities that alienate a certain group of people. Not everyone can afford a $500 dinner plate at a fundraising event. Yet we popularize this as this is a must go, right? And 500 is the starting. It only goes up. And you end up having the same people going to all these type of events, same pictures and all that, same speeches. And we talked earlier about transformation and change. That's not how change happens. Change happens by opening the doors to those who don't have that income and cannot afford to go to these things. How, this is up to the community leaders to figure this out. But this requires a lot of self-discipline and very serious reflection on one's sort of activity and work. It's a very deep and personal point here, but I don't want to take away Razmik from you. So go ahead.
Yeah, Aleksandr, what it means to be Armenian has a very short answer for me. An Armenian is an Armenian who says he or she is Armenian and tries to do something about it. Period. That's it. That's an Armenian. And I don't need to elaborate into anything else. The question, where are you from, is more complicated. Whereas with the Scots and the Irish, if you ask a Scottish diasporan where you're from, they would say Scotland or the city in Scotland, Aberdeen or whatever. When you ask an Armenian in the diaspora where you're from, that answer is not at all given. The new diaspora, they're from Armenia, from Yervant Zorian, Gyumri, whatever. But for the established Armenia, it's a whole different country. The imagination of where you're from, it's a whole different territory, which is now in Eastern Turkey, right, after the genocide. But I want to bring something, some other underlying assumption here that runs throughout this kind of conversations. And I don't know if everyone would agree with this, but when we talk about networks and connecting diaspora to Armenia, there is always this assumption that there is a golden key, that if we find that key, we will unlock the potential of the diaspora, and every diaspora will flood into Armenia. And for 30 years, not 35 years, for 30 years, we've been trying the different keys. And my conclusion is that there is no golden key. This is the diaspora. It's going to mobilize during periods of war, but every other time it's not going to. It's not going to care. It cares sometimes. But there is no way to unlock this immense diasporan potential. This is the diaspora. This is how it's connected. This is how it is going to remain connected. Now, this leads me to the other fundamental point that I want to make, and that is, broadly speaking, that theory of change, let's say. What has worked in Armenia in the last 20, 30 years in terms of diasporan input? And let me give the well-known examples. TUMO, American University, Co-op, the Afeyam Foundation, perhaps Synopsis too, although Synopsis is a business, is not a foundation. All these things did not wait for unity, did not wait for networks, did not wait for really anything. They were visionaries who thought, I'm going to gather around me 2, 3, 5, 10 people, in the case of the AUA a bit more, and I'm going to realize this. They didn't wait for networks. They didn't wait for everyone getting together, everyone saying this is a good idea. They just did it. And now we're very proud of these things, right? I mean, we're very proud that these things happen. But how did these things happen in Armenia? We need to understand that. We need to analyze that. We need to see what really worked in the Armenian case. And what really worked in the Armenian case is, again, a small individuals or small groups of people who had a vision, who had an idea, and created the terrain and the reality to make that happen. And this is how countries change. And so I will be very curious to know what Yervant and others think, that where does network theory fit into this? I mean, I'm not seeing it fit into this. I'm not seeing one of the groups of HyeConnect or whatever will come up with this idea and say, okay, now we're going to turn it big. But perhaps I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, actually, because then, this huge network could produce results. But I'm very, very skeptical based on what I have observed in Armenia over the last 35 years, and historically what I have observed about the way Armenians and Armenia and the diaspora have functioned.
Yeah. If I may, Razmik, very good point. I really appreciate that. The examples that you mentioned and the ones to come in the future are networks created for a purpose. They're not networks created to create a network. Mm-hmm. So that it's not for connectedness. The connectedness will help, but those are typically networks that came together, few people, small groups, large groups, and so on, to do something. And often it had some individuals from diaspora, some individuals from Armenia. Collaboratively, they met that purpose. The examples that you gave were successful examples. Some others did stuff, but did not succeed. Right. So success is not guaranteed, but there is an important component there that we need to take into consideration. Now, if we put the network with a purpose, then that's success. Now, HyeConnect wise, you're mentioning it, digital, you can create a network there of people who are not priorly connected, perhaps. Okay, so it's a way of searching, finding people with the same concerns, with the same objectives, and so on, and giving an opportunity for people to come together. When we created Synopsis, I had to go started this stuff first. I had to go to Armenia to find out colleagues in my own domain, collaborate with them, strengthen them on the AUA umbrella first, and then open this up to a wider range where combining it with multinationals from Silicon Valley and so on. I will not tell the entire story, but it is, again, purpose-based network. Same thing elsewhere, same thing when we created the Armenian Virtual College, right? So again, we had certain goals using technology in education, okay? And find the topics, find the people to contribute to, work with Armenia technologists, with Armenia content-oriented people. And then once you have a core, then use your bigger network in order to expand it further worldwide. Today we have 45,000 e-learners, but that comes later. Once you make a successful center.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's my point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Could I add one point, important point to what Razmik you were saying? I would add that in all the cases that you mentioned, the examples, a critical ingredient is the human investment and the financial investment in all of these projects. Many a times, we all know in the diaspora, we have brilliant ideas, we come up with brilliant ideas, but it stays there because we haven't thought about, okay, how are we going to source this? How are we going to find the people? We have the people, but you cannot just rely on volunteers. So I think one ingredient also, if we are talking about networks, obviously the purpose of the network is important. what is the network for? What is it going to achieve? It's important. But then the next question is, how do you make this happen? You need human or financial resources.
Yeah.
And these are the two things that we talk least about, again, based on my experience. And as a result, unless, so all these successful projects have started with people who have the resources, and they have collected the network or built the network to make it happen. So in the case of HyeConnect or others, you know, there is Miasin, a number of other projects in Europe who are trying to do the same thing, connect people with similar ideas or professions and so on. That one, it's going to take much longer, and maybe there is ultimately the success rate might be much less than expected. In what sense? Assuming that those who are going to connect with each other ultimately are going to find the means to implement their project or implement their ultimate goal by coming together. But my hypothesis or my guess is those who have the means already, they're not going to connect, or they're not going to go and sign up on a website to network with others because they have $1 million to invest in Armenia. So we have to also, what I'm saying is we have to be realistic about what a networking platform or networking idea or project could achieve ultimately.
May I say something? Actually, HyeConnect was taught to bring supporters and those who need the support together and be transparent. So the community, the person who want to support, to see the communities who need the support and the projects which are, and not only supporting with the money but also skills. So there are many platforms, but and many different ways of investing in Armenia, but there were always some filters between where these funds go, you know. So why I love HyeConnect, that it doesn't have any filters. It is transparent. Nobody is selecting who deserves supporting and not, because there are many agencies who are helping the supporter to find the right investment place. There are platforms which have boards which are deciding which project deserves to appear and which the project doesn't deserve to appear. But in HyeConnect, we are here to create tools and means and environment and values which could bring together people to help each other and see each other, to find each other without any agencies, without any filters, without any institutions. That is what motivating me personally very much. And that is the difference I see between HyeConnect and other platforms so far. Actually, if I may, I would turn to the questions, because we are already have 30 minutes to complete. So there are many comments which are telling that we need platform to connect easier. I just want to tell Lusanet Collective LLC, from Burbank. They said we are hosting event to provide networking, but we need platform to connect easier to each other. So, dear Lusanet Collective LLC, we are going to launch HyeConnect end of this year. There will be launching event in Los Angeles, and you are welcome to our platform to find more people, and I hope we will have more big community by that time, and very soon to provide you wider choice for your connections. Sosi Tatikyan is asking, how can your research contribute to reduction of the current polarization between the significant part of diaspora and the state of Armenia, and not deepen it further? It is not a secret that a part of diaspora strongly opposed to the foreign policy of Armenia, and their identity is anchored in the issues of genocide and Artsakh that are not on the agenda of Armenia any longer. Is there any who want to answer to this question?
I can say, but I'll speak from, again, my own research on this. And there's no substitute for hard labor. So whatever we can propose and spend years and hours developing those models, the important thing is that someone listens to that and takes that into consideration, right? So there has to be this has to happen on both sides, and I'm not sort of isolating one or the other. There's no bias. So it has to be on both sides. We just talked about the diaspora organization's transformation. I mean, 25 years we're talking about that. And yes, some things are changing, but you know, to me, the simplest thing, the way how diaspora organizations can transform is by actually, and I am a little bit biased, but I work with these examples, is to help Armenian students get scholarships that are meaningful. Not in the US terms, $500 is really nothing. But meaningful, that can help them get the education, that doesn't push them out of the education system. The one way to actually continue diaspora scholarship is to have people, in this case, going with our established definition, choosing to be Armenian, to continue to write about topics related to Armenia. You have professionals across any field and researchers, but not that many of them actually look into what's going on in Armenia or connect Armenia in their topics, right? So simply giving more money to schools rather than new buildings or things like that is probably a priority in this context, at least to me, and the fundraisers. But then there was another conversation about the golden key. I like that analogy, Razmik. Some time ago, there was an article that came from the Armenia's IT community, high tech, which talked about, you know, how simple it is. It turns out it's the difference in the electric socket. And so we just need to find the right socket that plugs into the diaspora. This is the example of a minimalistic and very reduced understanding of what we're even dealing with, right? So to answer the earlier question, it's not that simple. First, there needs to be a conversation, right? But again, in this case, Armenia is not the exception. Mexico has had its share of the political and policy-wise disagreements with the Mexican diaspora members in the United States, sending massive amount of money, supporting entire villages with schools and everything, but disagreeing with the government's policy and then withholding that monetary support. Armenian diaspora, I'm not sure it can do that because of, again, there's a lot that's being done, but it's sort of isolated. But there's another, I think, related to this. We also have to acknowledge that in the audience, we have Vartan Marashlan, who leads the Repat Armenia, and they just had a really successful sort of week or so in meeting with diaspora members across Germany, right? And so I think that's an example of sort of that people are interested. And if you look at the pictures, there's like 100 people in each city, right? So there's definitely interest in connecting with Armenia. The question is, you know, what people get in return. And to Hratch's point earlier, it really takes just one misstep for the trust to evaporate. And then economists have looked into that, and they say then you need to have 7 positive events to follow up on negative for the trust to be established. So,
Could I
I don't have a direct answer because it's not possible to give a direct answer here.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd like a related point, and I think this relates to Ms. Tatikian's question. I think at least now for the last hour or so, we're using the term diaspora as this universal term. But what is the diaspora? When we say diaspora, are we including the community in Uruguay or in Bulgaria or the Armenians in Iraq? I've always over the years, I always make the point, we have to be more specific as which community, which diaspora, because diasporas, it's plural. So when we say diaspora, it's an abstraction. Who do we mean? If you're talking about investment, you have to be more specific. If you are talking about networking, as it was mentioned, you're talking about professions. So when it comes to political issues, as it was mentioned, it's hard to say what is the position of the diaspora. We cannot generalize it, but you have to say, so and so this political party's position is this. This group's position is that. Then you can analyze it, better. But if we say diaspora is against or pro, we're not really making an analysis in that sense. So I think in all these conversations, while when we talk about Armenia as a republic, as a state, as a country, you can define it what it is. But diaspora is not equal to Armenia in that sense. It's not a country. It's not a monotype. It's not governed centrally. So you have as many Armenians as there are people living outside. So if we're going to make progress in Armenia diaspora relations, and generally when we talk about the diaspora, it's extremely important that we are more specific as who are we talking about, which organization, which segment, which aspect of diaspora. And final point, when we say the diaspora, at least based on my calculations, 80% of the Armenian diaspora is in 4 countries today. It's not, hundreds. Yeah, there are Armenians in more than 100 countries, but the 80% plus is in 4 countries: Russia, America, France, and Georgia. If you consider Georgia diaspora, then Georgia is the 4th country. So we have to be more specific if we are going to have a better understanding and analyze the issues in a proper context.
Okay.
There is a question about movement building. Do you want us to answer some of the questions, Liliya, or do you want to ask the question?
Yeah, there are many questions in the queue, but you go ahead.
The question about how to create movement building, and we touched upon this a little bit, and Yervant mentioned it too, and I mentioned it too when I talked about these big examples. How do you build a movement? And we're doing this in our case, and we have done this, not doing it. We have done this with Western Armenian, the use of the Western Armenian revitalization, and it's now a movement. First, you have the idea. Then you have a small group of people who create a core around that idea. And this is not too different from what Yervant was describing. And that core starts implementing the idea and showing that, hey, this is working, this is having an impact, this is having some sort of result. And then that core gets bigger and bigger, and you still maintain the core, and then you build layers and not layers, you build ripples around it. Bigger and bigger and bigger. That's how you create the movement, so that people, when they say, in this area, you have to go to, this organization, because everyone is talking about this organization that has created the movement and is leading this movement. That's how you do it. You don't do it the other way around. Let's all get united. Let's all agree. We're never gonna all agree. We're not gonna get united. All that discourse is basically counterproductive when you start talking about, let's get together, unite, agree on a program, and then implement it. No, you have an idea, you like the idea, you think it's a good idea, collect around you 2-3 people who agree with you, and then build it up bit by bit, and have patience. It takes time. None of these things that we give examples of happened overnight. They took years. And then we also didn't mention the failed examples, that there are also some failed examples. And we need to analyze why those failed. And they failed because the resources are not there, the human resources or the financial resources. All of us know of great ideas that people have started. And then you say, well, who's going to pay for this? Well, the money will come. Well, no, the money will not come. So it's not automatic. You need to think about the resource issues way in advance and engage the people who have the money. Say, hey, listen, I have an idea. So that's how movements are built. Just to answer that specific question.
Yeah.
There was another question, actually, if I may touch on that one. It's from Vartan Marashlan from Repat, Armenia, and it's actually an interesting question in terms of what do we consider to be a success, Razmik, to your earlier point. And that's a really hard question, because it's as a development economist, to me, it's sort of on an ongoing basis. Sure, we have the AUA, by the way. It's one of the biggest successes of diaspora, whatever the circumstances. But the fact that something like that exists, it's one of the biggest diaspora achievements. And again, in business, there are many other examples. But each successive step like that only builds the foundation for continued growth, right? For something that comes later. And this is where I think I would want to return us back to the conversation on diversity that we sort of stated exists and characterizes diaspora. And then once we understand and embrace this diversity of ideas and conflicting political views and all that, religions as well within the Armenian community, then we need to maximize the volume, I think, in terms of the scale and number of people engaged in this, let's say, engagement with Armenia or within the diaspora networks. Because you can have a great network, and again, high-tech sector is a perfect example. Perfect networking, well, not perfect, but great networking, established network, but they often operate in isolation from the rest of other groups. And so those neural networks that we talked about, they need to be connected. And I think one answer is to be sort of open to sort of admitting really diverse set of members into the diaspora network, being open to a lot of ideas.
Just one footnote to that. I saw the Vartan Marashian's question too. He's asking a crucial question regarding impact and critical mass. If this was a conversation about about international development or philanthropy or whatever, since I'm in this field, I would say always ask the question about impact, but don't try to answer it, because history is going to answer that question.
Yeah.
And things like REPAT or things like language, things like education, the answer is going to come decades later. You have to think about it, what impact you're going to have. Of course, my board doesn't always agree with this. They want impact next year, but I understand that. But we need to think about the impact question, the critical mass question, but not be hung up that we must always demonstrate this from year to year. You cannot. It'll take sometimes, as I said, decades to have. So that's just a footnote to what
we're living in the influencer times. That's why there's demand for immediate impact and result.
If I may, I think the other way of approaching is, rather than, obviously impact is very critical, but also to ask, what problem are we resolving by doing this? And then it's little easier or more tangible to have such an approach, because then you say, this is the problem and this is the solution that we're trying to resolve this. And this obviously is another approach in diasporic life that on the organizational level, we keep reminding ourselves that if we are doing something, when we're thinking about programs and activities, what is it? What problem are we trying to resolve? And this is where leadership, and Razmik and I have talked about this endlessly, the issue of leadership becomes critical, because leaders are supposed to find solutions. Managers manage what's there and, make things move forward. But you need leadership to resolve the issues and see what's coming up and address what's ahead in the, organizational life and so on. And I think this is something that at least the traditional Armenian organizations in the diaspora have fallen behind in terms of contemporary thinking and operating. That's why there is a decline of especially the political parties in the diaspora, and most of the organizations that have been around for 50 or more years, where there is some stalemate, or they're not moving forward. They're losing members, and exactly because lack of leadership and vision and forward-looking thinking.
But they're not going to change on their own. So should there be new organizations created?
Definitely. I think Razmik and I were talking earlier that there is absolute need for new organizations to be created in the diaspora, but how and when are they going to be created? That's an open question.
Yeah.
Some people think that we need to reform the existing ones, but some of them are unreformable. They either need to close shop or reinvent themselves. But definitely there is a need for new organizations. And I think we are seeing new organizations being formed because of they're addressing a certain need in the community, and they're just doing it.
Yeah. And I believe in competition. And I think I seem to recall there was a dissertation or something from early 2000s that looked at the diaspora organizations and said it's because they coexist in competition with each other that they're so effective. In terms of lobbying, because we didn't touch on these things as well, but there's a whole literature that is evolving now on diaspora as a diplomacy and diaspora investment and things like that. But maybe that's for
Yeah.
another.
If I can just mention something and do a little plug, we are. I mentioned earlier, we at Gevorkyan, we're starting this virtual think tank on diaspora and perspectives. It is to look at Armenian national issues, but from Armenia and the diaspora, but from a diasporan angle. So it's a completely different approach. And we're going to launch it on December 5. So you'll hear more about it after December 5. But the point the reason I mention it is that in addition to institutions and all that, we need the spaces. And I think Sosi's point regarding polarization also sort of touched on this. We need the spaces where we can have expert conversations, depoliticized, not everything politicized in terms of partisan politics, but the spaces where experts can discuss and others can participate and discuss issues that concern us all. And we're going to start a series of seminars called Diaspora and the end would be diaspora and institutions, diaspora and education, diaspora and culture, diaspora and whatever other sports or cooking, other issues that are important in the diaspora. And the idea is that this kind of fora already exists a little bit, but the idea is to be able to discuss some of these issues in an environment that is not political. It's above the political fray. It's not to score points. It's not lobbying. It's just to discuss. And, hopefully it'll succeed. Maybe it will not. We don't know. But hopefully it will succeed. And I think if you have the right expertise and the right participants who are not disruptive for the sake of being disruptive, it would succeed. And our idea is that from each of these, there would be a policy paper or some sort of publication. Diaspora in economics, Aleksandr, for example, we cannot forget that. So that's one of the things that we're doing in order to try to create this discussion, create this space in order to
I shared some of the readings in the conversation. One of them is the Armenian Diaspora Survey, Razmik Hratch that you worked on, and then, of course, my stuff. But on diaspora economics, what impressed me a long time ago in a public forum, there was a conversation. A diaspora investor just losing their patience goes, well, don't tell me how I can make money in Armenia. I've made all the money in the world. Tell me how my money can help build stronger economy, how it fits into the bigger picture. And I think that's answering some of the questions earlier, and including in the chat. I think that's the common ground that we have to think about.
If we are ready to continue, I would like to read a couple of more questions. Can you
okay.
Yeah. Paul Nargisian, he is asking, in an age of social media and diaspora network, where do Armenians primarily get their news? And how do those platforms shape perception of truth? And how can educational institutions, both in Armenia and abroad, integrate media literacy and critical thinking to build long-term resilience against misinformation? Do you have
diaspora gets its news from? In my survey, I had 500 people answering my survey, and the most common answers were, other than social media, most trusted diaspora-based newspapers, TV networks, Armenia-based newspapers, TV networks. So that, but also, interestingly, word of mouth.
Yeah. Also, in our survey, when we asked about social media, the top answer was to connect with family and friends, and second was to connect with other Armenians.
Yeah, to recheck.
Someone earlier in the chat asked about perks in terms of network, but again, this boils down and reduces to very mechanic and technical things. I think in our earlier conversations, we talked about how network is not a mainframe. It's very flexible. So, but one of the perks of being part of the Armenian diaspora is exactly what Hratch just stated, right? And it is the emotional fulfillment of some type. There are a lot of internal crisis to overcome, but generally it's this sense of belonging.
From my side, I would tell, I don't know, it's very hard to tell about the truth, but medial, if you may say media literacy, I have a project in HyeConnect I created, and you will be surprised, but from early 20s, from let's say 98, 97, 98, there are many efforts towards media literacy driven in Canada, in US, everywhere. But and they first of all to start from schools. Yeah, I connected with this. When you see all these games or cartoons which are teaching media literacy to children, and not only actually children, but it relates to adults also, they are using this Three Pigs fairy tale, and I just bring the Tumanyan's fairy tales about the bird who is taking, who is giving a stick and taking Pushik tavi, loshik ara, loshik tavi, garnuk ara, garnik tavi, harsik ara, harsik tavi, sazik ara, verchum hokina arnom. So it's a real story. Armenian Tumanyan's fairy tales are fantastic material for making media literacy cartoons or materials for just upbringing and showing not only upbringing children but adults, but also showing the heritage we have, the value, the values which are sleeping right now, and if we look back into our treasury of national creations, we have so much materials to be, which can make us wiser as a nation, because they are just not realized. And investing money is not just investing, building houses or schools or I don't know, table and chair, but also the potential our culture has is not realized properly. If it could be realized, much more effective, we could effectively we could survive and develop our nation. So I have this project and many interesting groups in HyeConnect. A girl joined, created Tumanyan storytelling. So I just recalled what we have already, so you can join and see this project in HyeConnect about the media literacy. What about the truth and the news? I'm sorry. I am completely agreed that I always check with family and friends. That's there are people whom you trust, and if they suspect, if they are don't very sure for something, I believe them. That's my point.
I think the issue of truth and what news you listen and how you follow is such a huge and universal issue. It's not really related just to us and diasporans in Armenia. It's a global issue. And
yes,
There's
and the answers and the solutions to that, if there are any, have to be at the global level. They're not going to be at the
the one thing, since Liliya mentioned Tumanyan also has an interesting response in the letter to Aviti Gitaikyan. Will not retell you the full letter, but essentially that the nation is broken and poor, and the situation is disastrous. So when he says, you ask about if the times are right, of course the times are right. You come and you'll see. And that's I think the message that Repat Armenia is pushing in terms of connecting and engaging with people and talking about, I don't know, I try not to use the big words, but like the truth of the situation. That's what impressed me in my experience, in my research, that this is one group that goes out there and tries to get the diaspora people, or people living in the diaspora, organized. And importantly, they don't discriminate in terms of which part of the diaspora and so on. They have their funding limitations and things like that. But this point on being open and organizing an event that is open to everyone, because this is first and foremost a community service, I think that's important. And this is what the organizations have to understand. What they're doing is not a fundraiser, but they're serving a bigger purpose. And that's how they fit into this mosaic of whatever we call diaspora. I don't think that realization is there. And I think it's big, it's problematic. And that's why we talked about young people. That's why a lot of young people are pushed out into all sorts of other areas and interests. So I think we're running out of time, or
yeah, I have to go in about 5 minutes as well.
Yes, and unfortunately, Yervant had a meeting and he left. He asked me to apologize and for that.
The last thing I would say is that there is a chat and an exchange about what that being a member of the diaspora has to have some perks. Actually, it doesn't. It costs you money. It costs you to be a member of the diaspora. About 30 years ago, someone did a rough study, not very scientific, but a rough study by the typical family in Toronto, Canada. This is 30 years ago. For them, being Armenian and being engaged with the Armenian community cost them $4,000 a year. So this is not a perk. This is where the commitment issue comes in. And you can say, I'm going to make $40 a year donation, or none, or 4,000 or none, whichever you want. But there is really no perk. It's like who you are. And if you want to be like this, you continue to be like this. Okay, sometimes you might get a free taxi ride because your taxi driver was Armenian. If you want to count that as a perk, fine. But generally, it's not a logic of a perk or a benefit or whatever. It's part of who you are, part of your identity, and part of your contribution. Again, no one should judge if someone is a good or bad Armenian based on any criteria. Someone is an Armenian who says they are Armenian, but they try to do something about it. So I think we should try to get out of this idea of what benefit I'm going to get, what I'm going to. This is who you are. If you want to be this, if you don't want to be this, fine, you're not this. So
yeah. And one
Right.
question, yes.
I thought we were saying our last words. Okay.
One question which is interesting for me too. It's just from Shant Babumian. How can we protect the recording of this event as well as other precious information from malicious groups? How can we screen those who have access? How will the Armenian diaspora survey information be protected from malicious groups looking to obtain that data? I wanted to ask if these survey are confidential or they are public to the wide society. So are you, what is the confidentiality of the survey materials?
In terms of the results, it's going to be public. It's not confidential. The results and the data will be available. In terms of where the raw data is sitting, I think it'll be prudent for us not to comment on that. You know, there is
My result.
It's in places where it enjoys the highest level of security. But beyond that, I don't think there is a question.
My survey results are summarized in charts and graphs, but if somebody wants details, then that's only upon request. So I know who the person is receiving that, number one. Number two, they're all anonymous. So there's no way to track it back to any individual.
Susi Tatikyan is writing, I was making presentation in a Harvard webinar and my presentation was violently hacked by Azerbaijan using AI. There is a need for security protocols. Of course, and just for your information, right now we are passing very strong penetration tests for HyeConnect and checking all the security measures, taking all security enhancement measures. So, of course, the technology is developing very quickly, but the protection is not well taught yet, because nobody is investing in protection, but they are investing in the development only. So that is my point. So if there are any questions outstanding, I would ask everyone who left the comments and you think that you are not answered, please register on HyeConnect this event page, and we are going to continue this conversation on that event page.
Can I just say a concluding word on my part, and that is that we talked about long history, thousands of years of history and such. We know what that history was. It shouldn't give the confidence of resilience or stability. In fact, what matters really is how we live, right? So this is where I think the benefit of this conversation is that we sort of looks like we agree on things, and that's a rare thing. And Liliya, you asked us to comment about the future. In the future, I hope that the two Armenians, wherever they might be, when they see each other, they walk the same street. They don't cross the street from each other.
Oh yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I should go.
Thank you. Very. I really appreciate your time and your honesty. How honest you were and open. I really liked the discussion. I was waiting for this for maybe 5 years.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. See you.